Hi, boys and girls. I am back with another story, another one of my favorites. This one is called Auntie Claus and the Key to Christmas. If you are listening to this one and you haven't listened to Auntie Claus, you might want to go back and listen to that one first. You don't have to, but it's a little better because they do kind of go in order. Um, and again, I love this story. Pay attention to the details in the photographs um, because there's so much more to see to the story than just listening to the words. So as you listen, make sure you're looking closely. So, Auntie Claus and the Key to Christmas. Here's a little note card from Auntie Claus. Darlings, the story you are about to be told is absolutely true. It happened one Christmas when my nephew Christopher began to have doubts, shall we say. The entire family was in a frightful uproar and very cross. Well, we couldn't have that, heavens no. So it was up to me to intervene. Now, hang up your stockings, darling, and turn this page, for here is where you will find my key to Christmas. Young Christopher Kringle lived at the Bing Cherry Hotel in New York City with his parents, the Kringles, and his sister, Sophie. Chris loved going to the Jingle Bell Company, where his father was the president. He spent many happy hours at the Mistletoe to Nail Salon, which his mother owned. But most of all, Chris loved listening to his great aunt, Auntie Claus, tell stories about the Kringle family, the North Pole, and Santa. Dear boy, she would always say, when things seem dark and dreary, if times turn sour and bitter, think like a Kringle. You'll soon find your way to all that sparkles and glitters. But Chris wasn't so sure, not anymore, for he had begun to wonder about his great aunt. In fact, Chris had begun to wonder about his entire family. Then one day he overheard a pair of out of towners, the Spam twins, who were staying at the Bing while on tour promoting their book, We're Geniuses and You're Not. Chris soon learned that Ozzy and Pam were commonly known as the Smarty Pants Spams and had become international sensations. So, how could he ignore something they'd said? Hey, Pam, Ozzy sniggered. It's a week after Halloween, and that lady is in a Christmas outfit. Is still in her costume? Snickered Pam. You'd think she was Santa Claus's sister, Ozzy snorted. Only babies believe in Santa Claus, they chortled. And so it was that exactly 1 week after Halloween, Chris repeated what he had heard, and the entire Kringle family was thrown into a tumultuous uproar. Mrs. Kringle screamed and dropped a full bottle of mistletoe toenail polish on the carpet. Mr. Kringle, who was in the process of stringing jingle bells, lost his balance and careened right into the middle of his favorite Christmas tree. And you call yourself a Kringle? Shame on you, said Chris's older sister, Sophie. To no one's surprise, Chris was immediately summoned to Auntie Claus's suite at the Bing, to Penthouse 25C for tea. It has come to my attention, Auntie Claus began, that there is a nasty rumor going around that some children are saying Well, it's unspeakable, preposterous. It's completely unacceptable. Marmalade cake, darling. Chris squirmed in his seat. I have never known a Kringle to repeat such things. Auntie Claus paused to stir her tea. It is time you learned a little family secret. But first, there is something you should know about children who start such rumors. The room suddenly became very quiet. Dark clouds began piling up outside. The truth of the matter is that these children eventually become rather unattractive grown ups. Try some lovely cookies, darling. Unattractive? Chris asked. Yes, said Auntie Claus. These children become grown ups who enjoy seeing a birthday cake slip off the edge of a table and go splat on the floor. To them, having it rain on the day of a parade is what eating a chocolate eclair is to you. And they have formed a club. A club, said Chris. Yes, darling, a club, said Auntie Claus. It's called the Parade Rainers United National Elite Society, or Prunes for short. Heavens, Auntie Claus continued, that you, of all people, would say such a thing. Why, I should think it would rather hurt Santa's feelings. Do you know Santa? Chris asked. Why, of course, I know him. The very idea, Auntie Claus said. Sophie rolled her eyes. Chris is going to be on the BB&G list again. BB&G list? Asked Chris. Auntie Claus sighed. B, B, and G, darling, is short for bad boys and girls. Anyone on Santa's BB&G list goes without presents for Christmas. So unfortunate. But Chris was not convinced. I'll believe it when I see it, he said. That's my motto. Dear boy, don't you know that all the best things are invisible? Auntie Claus said. Sometimes you have to believe in order to see. That's my motto. That is the key. At midnight, Auntie Claus left for her annual business trip. And at midnight, Chris was wide awake. Is there really a BB&G list? He thought. I get presents every year. And to be honest, I'm not all that good. There was only one way to find out. Chris had made up his mind. If there really is a BB&G list, my name is going to be on it, he said, and maybe then I'll get to the bottom of this family secret once and for all. The very next day, Chris eliminated please and thank you from his vocabulary. He made rude noises and ate with his mouth open. He whined whenever it looked like someone had something better than he did, and regularly squashed his vegetables in his dinner napkin. For good measure, he started cheating at board games and screaming if he didn't get his own way. By Christmas Eve, Chris was pretty sure he had covered everything, but he still had doubts. There's no such thing as a BB&G list, he said. There is too, said Sophie. I'll believe it when I see it, Chris said. What if I told you that I got your name off that list last year because I'm such a nice sister, Sophie said. You are not, said Chris. Am too, said Sophie. And that's not all. Auntie Claus is Santa Claus's older sister. She is not, insisted Chris. is, shouted Sophie. Prove it, demanded Chris. I will, said Sophie, but you'll have to go on a little trip. Fine, said Chris. Sophie grabbed her brother's hand and led him up to Auntie Claus's penthouse. Shh, Sophie said as they tiptoed through the dimly lit apartment to Auntie Claus's private elevator. From inside her jumper, she removed a red ribbon necklace, at the end of which was a diamond key. Look, she whispered. The key glittered in her hand. If you don't believe me, Sophie said, inserting the key into the lock on the elevator, then ask Mr. Pudding. The elevator door slid open. I will, said Chris, stepping inside. Who's Mr. Pudding? The door began to close. Say that you're the new elf. Don't forget, Sophie said. Suddenly the key sparkled and flashed, illuminating the darkness, and flew from her hand into Chris's just before the door shut. What? Said Chris. The doors closed and the elevator began to move. Wait, Chris screamed. Remember, you're the new elf. Sophie's voice faded as the elevator rose higher and higher. I'm the new elf, Chris said as the elevator began to pick up speed. The new elf, he said through chattering teeth. The night was getting colder and colder. Chris looked around the elevator and was relieved to see a warm jacket, a hat, a pair of mittens, socks, boots, and trousers, all neatly folded in one corner. He quickly put them on and placed the key around his neck. The elevator continued its trip through the starry night. Thunk! The elevator landed and Chris stepped out. I'm the new elf, he said loud and clear. Hello, Mr. Pudding here, head elf in charge of vital rules and information. Good, said Chris. You're just the person I was told to see. Oh dear, who did you say you are? The new elf, said Chris. The new elf? No, you're not. Mr. Pudding looked closely at Chris. You are Christopher Kringle. Oh dear, oh dear. He pulled out a little red and green book and started to read. At 10:12 a.m., that's Eastern Standard Time, on November 8th through the 14th, Christopher Kringle made rude noises, and on those days he did not say please or thank you. Oh dear, let me see. Vegetable squashing, eating with his mouth open. You've got quite a bit of insisting on his own way. Oh dear, December 20th, cheating at Candyland. Mr. Pudding escorted Chris out of the gates. Sorry, but it's a rule, part of the arrival procedure. No BB&Gs, meaning no spoiled brats, no crybabies, and absolutely, positively no one who doesn't believe, he whispered, and Mr. Pudding closed the gates. But, Chris wailed. I was trying to get on the BB&G list on purpose. Oh dear, said Mr. Pudding, and no whiners either. He locked the gates. Mr. Pudding, Chris called, you don't understand. It's not my fault. It's Ozzie and Pam's. Ozzie and Pam? Some voices said. Chris was startled to see a company of snowboys. You know them? He said. The Spam twins are members in very good standing, they all replied. Members? Asked Chris. They're international sensations, they added. Can you help me? Chris asked. I've been locked out of Christmas. Locked out of Christmas? Come with us. We're on our way to see the High Head. He'll like you. Yeah, but will I like him? Chris thought. because these snow boys are really starting to get on my nerves. Down, down, down they marched. It began to drizzle as the snow boys sang, "We are spoiled brats, we like to whine. We're prickly as a porcupine. We don't believe in you know who, or in reindeer that can fly. If we don't get our own way, we'll scream, we'll bite, we'll cry. Yes, we're on the list every year until we're 21. But we don't care because being bad is just too darn much fun. And when we're all grown up, we'll have one great big goal to turn your sparkly diamonds into lumps of coal. In short, we love to burst balloons. Our heroes, Ebenezer Scrooge. And why is that? Because we're prunes, Chris whispered. Welcome, said the high head. There was a flash of lightning. These aren't snow boys, Chris thought. They're prune boys. Now he would see that not only was the BB&G list real, but his name was the first one on it. There was a clap of thunder and it began to rain. Lovely, said the high head in his booming voice. What can I do for you, my boy? You see, it all started with Ozzy and Pam, Chris started to explain. He was beginning to think that maybe those smarty pants spams didn't know so much after all. Ozzy and Pam spam? He heard the head prune. Fine, children, cream of the crop. Cream of the crop, your royal pruneship, and the prune boys. As I was saying, I was locked out of Christmas, Chris continued. Locked out of Christmas? I'm not sure that even the Spam twins could manage that, said the head prune. They wouldn't even try, oh pruniest one, said the prune boys. You're a fine example of a BB&G, said the high head. State your name. And like the Spams, you, yes, you, can be a lifetime member, guaranteed. Member, schmember, I want to go home, Chris thought. He was even beginning to miss Sophie. I'm Christopher Kringle, Chris said. As in Santa Claus? Asked the prune. Yes, replied Chris. The prune boys started to giggle. We don't believe in Santa Claus, they snickered. I'm Christopher Kringle, Chris said, a little louder this time, and I do. Phooey, we don't believe in you, jeered the head prune. Just at that moment, Sophie's key sparkled and flashed in the dreary prune light, and it reminded Chris of something that he had heard many times, but he had forgotten. If times turn sour and bitter, think like a Kringle. You'll soon find your way to all that sparkles and glitters. I'm not a prune, I'm a Kringle, Chris said. And I'm absolutely positive there is a Santa Claus. A hush fell over the prune headquarters. And I don't believe in you, Chris shouted. Something extraordinary was happening. Were the prunes beginning to shrink? Chris couldn't believe his eyes. Now look what you've gone and done, wailed the head prune. Christopher Kringle! Chris shouted again as loudly as he could. The head prune and his prune boys were shriveling up fast now, shriveling up like prunes. Then some really strong magic happened. Just as in Auntie Claus's poem, the sour prunes coal that they had been collecting in the prune hall for ever so long was changing from dark and bitter lumps into diamonds that sparkled and glittered. Chris found himself whirling around and around through the air at a dizzying speed in a blur of prune purple into Christmas green. He closed his eyes. When Chris opened his eyes, he saw he was standing once again outside the gates. A clock struck midnight and the gates opened. Santa Claus circled above and landed. Ho, ho, ho! Welcome to Christmas, Santa said. Merry Christmas, Santa, Chris shouted. Then from behind the sleigh out stepped Auntie Claus! Chris exclaimed. My one and only big sister, said Santa. Couldn't get through a Christmas without her, right, lads? Hooray for Auntie Claus! Everyone cheered. Turning to Chris, Auntie Claus winked and said, I knew you had it in you, darling. They climbed into the sleigh and headed for the grand ballroom. But there was one thing Chris wondered about. Santa, he said, did you happen to get any letters from a couple of twins? Before Santa even heard him, Auntie Claus handed Chris 2 letters. Not surprisingly, they were nearly identical. Just as Chris finished reading them, a gust of wind blew the letters out of his hand. He watched as they vanished into the dark, snowy night. The sleigh entered the grand ballroom, and there were Chris's parents and his sister Sophie. Merry Christmas, everyone, Chris called to his family. So, do you believe me now? Sophie asked her little brother. Chris took Sophie's diamond key and placed it back around her neck. Like I always say, think like a Kringle, Chris said. His cheeks were red and his eyes sparkled. He's so much like his uncle, his parents said proudly. A real chip off the old block, said Auntie Claus. But shouldn't Chris get a key too? Sophie asked. Chris smiled mysteriously and replied, I did get the key. Dear boy, Auntie Claus patted his head. There is no doubt about it, darling, she whispered in his ear. And from that day on, there never was, believe it or not. And that is the end of the second story in the set of Auntie Claus stories. I hope you enjoyed that, boys and girls. I did. See you on the next story.